both the university authorities and the student unions, Thames Valley Police, Public Health, and Oxford City Council to talk about return of students to Oxford. At the time we were setting this up, we knew it would be a challenging period. Clearly, news headlines in recent weeks have meant there are all the more concerns, and that's why we're very glad that over the course of the last weeks and indeed months, there's been a lot of engagement between all of the people that you currently see on your screen, and people have worked really, really hard to keep Oxford safe. And that really is very much the theme of tonight's discussion. It's about keeping Oxford people as safe as they can be at this very, very difficult time, whether people are students, whether people are local residents who live here all year round. For me and for us, I think there's no difference. We want everyone to be as safe as they possibly can be. And of course, that means everyone needs to work as hard as they can to take responsibility for what they do and for the organisations that they work with. The plan tonight is that we'll have some presentations going through in turn from the different authorities. They've got quite strict timings, and I will be quite firm with those timings, because I think the particularly important part of the evening will come after those presentations, when some of the questions which have been submitted by people in advance, either to be read out or to ask live during the event, are then addressed by the presenters. And you'll see people joining in on the Zoom link. We'll also have a Q&A function which enables people to address questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to now turn to our first speakers. First presentation is to be by Oxford Brookes University, and I believe it is going to be Professor Anne-Marie Kildea who's going to give the opening 5-minute presentation. So Professor, over to you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Anne-Marie Kildea, and I'm the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Student and Staff Experience at Oxford Brookes. Let me begin by stating that we take our role in protecting against the further spread of COVID-19 extremely seriously. We recognise that the last 2 weeks have had their challenges, and you will be aware from local media reports that we have had some confirmed cases of coronavirus amongst our students and have also been dealing with a number of student gatherings. We take seriously the concerns of our neighbours and community. Brookes has always played a central and positive role in the local community, and of course we want that to continue. We're therefore very grateful to have the opportunity to talk to residents today, and I want to explain a little bit more about what we're doing to ensure that students can study in Oxford in a way that's safe for everyone. I'd like to reassure you that the safety of the wider community, along with students and staff, has been paramount in our preparations, and this will continue to be the case. We've been working closely with a range of partners, including the City and County Councils, the University of Oxford, and local NHS trusts to coordinate our efforts for the benefit of the wider community. And our relationships have never been stronger, and sharing information is helping us to take action. In terms of our teaching this semester, we are following national guidance and taking a blended approach to teaching and learning. Only teaching in smaller groups is taking place on campus. Teaching is carefully managed within spaces and is subject to the required safety measures, including social distancing and face coverings, which are mandatory indoors. That's also the case for essential on-campus services such as the library, wellbeing and disability services. Most of the face-to-face delivery of these kinds of services has been scaled back, and services are being delivered online wherever possible. Access to our campuses, which we are usually very proud to open to all, are now restricted. Entry doors are locked and access is permitted only to staff and students with a pass. For those areas of the campus that are open, we've followed the government's 5-step approach to ensure a COVID-secure campus, including extensive risk assessments, enhanced cleaning regimes, and social distancing measures. We're also operating our own test and trace system on campus in key areas, and we'll also operate the NHS's own test and trace in our public spaces such as cafes. We've also taken steps to reduce the number of people on campus. All non-academic staff who are able to work remotely will continue to do so until January, and we're encouraging all academic staff to work from home wherever they can. Having said all that, however, we also know that laws, guidance, policies and procedures are only as good as the behaviours of individuals. It's also important that we respond quickly and firmly to any issues which may suddenly arise. An example of this was the large gatherings of students that took place earlier this month outside one of our halls of residence. And as our Vice-Chancellor publicly stated, we are clear that this type of behaviour is totally unacceptable. Enforcement is, though, a team effort. As a university, we do not have enforcement powers off campus and have to rely on the support of the police and other partners, particularly in private, residential and public spaces. So in collaboration with Thames Valley Police and other partners, we're able to put in place additional measures to disperse groups meeting outside of our halls. Since those measures have been introduced, no large gatherings have taken place on our campuses. We will ensure that this continues to be the case. We will also be working with local partners to counteract where this is happening more widely in the community, such as in parks and community spaces. Where a resident believes that individuals are breaching coronavirus laws, we encourage them to contact the police by dialing 101 or reporting online. However, despite all the steps that we and indeed other universities have taken, we are seeing outbreaks in cities across the country. And where we do see cases, we're moving quickly to manage and contain them in partnership with Public Health England. It's important for us to be open with you about the number of cases that we're seeing and what we're doing about it. And therefore, we're providing updated case figures on our website on a weekly basis. I would like to stress that the majority of our students are following the rules and are taking their own safety seriously, as well as that of their other fellow students and that of the wider community. Throughout the summer and ahead of the arrival of our new and returning students, we communicated extensively with them to help ensure that they understand their responsibilities, and we'll continue to do this. We have also incorporated our clear expectations into our student conduct procedures, to which all students agree to adhere as part of their enrolment. Where this is not being met, we are taking action. Since arrivals weekend on the 12th of September, we've issued around 150 fixed penalties for breaches within halls of residence, and we've also sped up student conduct hearings for repeat offenders. In closing, I hope this overview demonstrates the comprehensive steps that we have put in place to ensure that our campuses are COVID secure and the local community remains safe. We're always keen to hear and receive feedback about where we need to improve. Local residents can contact our community engagement team at any time and also visit our website for further information on our approach to managing COVID-19.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Kilday. There was a lot of material there, and I'm sure we'll return to many of those themes. If I could now turn to Daisy Hopkins from the Brookes Student Union for your perspective on this.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name's Daisy Hopkins and I'm the president of Brookes Union. So Brookes Union also recognised that the last few weeks have presented a number of challenges, and you've seen in the media the coverage that the university have some confirmed cases of COVID, and we've also been dealing with a number of student gatherings. Brookes Union, we are taking this very seriously and have been working closely with the university to tackle this. In terms of service delivery, Brookes Union remains a majority online, with the exception of a few small-scale, very risk-assessed activities. We ran our Freshers' Fair this year, which was completely virtual, and will continue to adapt and change where needed. The actions of a minority of students we get are not acceptable, and the university has stated they will take action to enforce the rules against those who break them. We have been working hard on communicating with students, with the government guidelines and the law, as well as making sure the university guidelines and rules are followed. The majority of students do understand what is and what isn't acceptable behaviour. We've been working hard to manage the student expectations, but we need to keep reiterating the need to follow the rules. We'll be supporting students throughout this. It's a really difficult time, many away from home for the first time in a new city. It's a really challenging and confusing circumstances for a lot of people. The situation is not good for anyone, and particularly for people's mental health. So it's important to remember that our students are people too, and Brookes Union will be doing the best we can to support them.
Great, thanks very much indeed for that perspective. Next, we move on to Oxford University and Professor Karen O'Brien. Professor O'Brien.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm Karen O'Brien. I'm head of the Humanities Division at Oxford University, but I'm also co-chair with Baroness Janet Royal, who also joins us, of the university-wide group that has been tasked with ensuring a safe return of our students to Oxford University. And as you're probably all aware, some of our students are back, but mainly our students will be starting to return to campus next week in what we call North Week, with full term beginning the following week. So we have a little bit of a way to go before we're fully back. I've just summarised what we've been doing to ensure that we work in partnership with our students and the city, and public health and the police to ensure a really safe return for our students and a safe way of living. So Lauren, if you wouldn't mind just putting those slides up, I will just very rapidly talk through the key planks of our strategy. So if you could just go to the first slide, Lauren, that would be very helpful. Next slide. Okay, so we have created, in partnership with our student union, a unified strategy for a safe return. All of the decision making that we've been doing is clearly made in the light of government and Public Health England guidance, but we've also set up something we call our Health Measures Advisory Group, which is a group of Oxford medical experts chaired by Professor Chris Conlon, who is a professor of infectious diseases and who joins us today. Our contingency plans are extensive, comprehensible and adaptable, and are kept under review in the light of the changing pandemic. And it goes without saying, we're acutely aware how rapidly and how often things change. We have in place a comprehensive system of health measures and policies, as well as systems to look after the physical and mental health needs of students who have to quarantine and self-isolate. We have a lot of international students at Oxford. A number of them have arrived. They are having to quarantine for 2 weeks. We are doing everything we can to support them, and we are extremely mindful of the mental health strains and physical needs of students in this predicament. Above all, we want to emphasise that we're working in a very joined up way with the City Council, Thames Valley Police, Public Health England and Oxford Brookes, who have been extremely open and helpful in sharing their experiences with us so that we can learn from some of the things that happened a couple of weeks ago. Next slide. We have opened 2 dedicated university testing pods, one in North Oxford, the other in Headington. These are free and open to all staff and students. They work alongside the local authority and the NHS and will take some of the strain from local services. So it's important to emphasise that they add capacity to the city's testing and that they will give us the ability to respond in an agile manner to those students and staff who are symptomatic and who need a test. We've adapted all of our buildings for safe teaching and research. We've mandated a 2-metre social distance, and we've obviously included cleaning regimes, ventilation, and all the usual hygiene measures. We will, in line with government guidance, be using a combination of small group in-person teaching and remote learning, but we're also providing in parallel online options for those staff or students who cannot be present in person. We've mandated a 2-metre social distance for all indoor activities, including teaching, and the use of face coverings in all teaching settings. So it's a pretty consistent set of policies and health measures under advice across the whole university. Next slide. We're going to group students in residence into households of around 8. Outside of their households, they'll be required to maintain the mandatory 2-metre social distance in all educational and social activities. We've developed detailed guidance for student sport, performing arts and societies, alongside provision for in-college catering and opportunities to drink and socialise in ways that will be supervised and that will be at the required distance. And very importantly for us, all of our students are required to sign something we're calling the Student Responsibility Agreement, which asks our students to make specific commitments to abide by government and university health policies and to protect our Oxford City community, whether inside university and college premises or outside university buildings. And we may take disciplinary action against the individuals, and we hope there'll be a very small minority of individuals who put the community at risk. And we've been very clear about that. Next slide. Finally, I think it's very important for the community to know, as they do with Brookes, who they can contact if they have any concerns about any aspect of our safety and community policies. So there's a number there that's manned all the time directly to the university security team, and there's an email address, and there's also an online form that can be filled in on the website if anyone has any concerns, and we undertake to respond and to get back as quickly as we can. And we've also put all of the information about our health measures and wider community information on our website, free and available for everyone to see. And we would be very keen to hear from any residents of the city who have any concerns or points they'd like to raise. And we very much intend to be fully responsive and to work together with our students to make this, under the dreadful circumstances that we're in, the best possible term that it can be, because we are looking forward to welcoming back our students. We are a university, we're all about the world-beating research that we do in the medical area, helping the world out of this crisis, and the important education that we and Brookes give to our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor O'Brien. Very much appreciated. We now turn to Ben Farmer from the Oxford University Students' Union. Ben.
Good evening. I'm Ben Farmer. I'm the Vice President, Charity and Community at Oxford SU. Over the next couple of weeks, many of the students at Oxford University will be returning to Oxford. Lots of them never left. Medical students from the university were on the front line of the NHS, whilst many delivered services as key workers. Hundreds of students joined the ongoing community campaigns led by Oxford Hub and Oxford Mutual Aid to support the most vulnerable groups throughout the pandemic. Of course, not all students remained in Oxford. Many returned to their family homes. Despite this, they remain part of the Oxford community and have contributed in their own way, for example, through a plethora of virtual events, from musical marathons to sporting challenges, which have raised thousands of pounds from Oxford charities. The hard work and dedication of students look set to continue into the new academic year, as students seek to help in the city that they're proud to call home. Whilst many students have been able to get into these activities, of course, many have found and continue to find the pandemic deeply distressing, with many students or members of their family in clinically vulnerable groups. Meanwhile, like all of us, too many have lost loved ones before their time. There have also been challenges beyond coronavirus. Students have faced a tough few months with uncertainty around A-level exams, whilst many students have also been angered and upset by the challenges brought to light by the Black Lives Matter movement earlier this year. As democratically elected student representatives, the sabbatical officers at Oxford SU have been working hard to put in place plans for the upcoming year. We've actively lobbied and worked closely with the senior leadership at our institution to ensure that the plans in place have the safety of the whole community in mind and as a priority. This is illustrated by our work at Oxford SU, providing guidance on the safe face-to-face socialising in COVID-secure spaces on campus for student leaders. A comprehensive public health campaign is being delivered by the university to remind students of their responsibility for the community. And as student representatives, we're supporting these campaigns. We are, of course, aware of the immense and complex challenges facing the Oxford community over the coming weeks and months, as highlighted by recent events at universities across the country. Students are just as aware of these issues and will be seeking to follow the guidance to help keep everyone safe. Whilst, like all of us, individual students may have momentary lapses of judgments, they're not here to break the guidance. Students have always wanted to act safely, and our concerns and fears about the virus are no different to the general populations. Students and student unions want clear leadership from the government and universities on returning and acting safely, not individual blame. Both the universities have resilient and proactive processes in place to deal with any persistent and intentional breaches of public health guidance. It is clear that the 2021 academic year will be a year like no other, and we at Oxford SU are committed to doing our bit to ensure the safety and well-being of the whole community here in Oxford.
Ben, thank you very much indeed, and thanks to all the university speakers for their perspectives. We now turn to Ansaf Azhar of the Oxfordshire County Council, who's our Director of Public Health locally. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. And may I start with thanking everyone for attending today's meeting and giving the opportunity to talk about this really important issue. I'm going to start off with giving a little bit of a perspective about the situation that we have in Oxfordshire and Oxford City in particular. We've got this is a pandemic, what we would normally call it a once in a lifetime pandemic that happens approximately every 100 years. And we are faced with this, and it is something that that wasn't predicted. It is not a new strain of virus, even though coronavirus is considered to be a virus that is known to us. It is not a new strain. And of course, it has affected Oxford in a way. But I want to start with reassuring everyone that we have done everything we can do to put the necessary measures in place to minimize the impact. Right from the start, we set up a surveillance unit, which will actually act as an early warning system to try and identify any rising case situations. And this is really important because what we have seen is we've saw a rise in cases around 8 to 12 weeks ago. And now we are starting to see a second peak scenario, where the cases are rising really fast. And actually what's really important is that we take decisive action at the right moment. And that is where the surveillance unit becomes really, really important. On about 3 weeks ago, we saw a rising case in Oxford City, and we picked this up very early. And actually by working in partnership with everyone, we've managed to contain the situation fairly quickly and fairly decisively. And whilst majority of the time, it is a matter of making it very clear about the guidance. It's about actually putting clear communication out to our public and our residents, and we managed to contain it. That was quite evident in terms of getting the numbers down. What we have now seeing is that we are also now seeing rising cases in Oxford, and we will continue to see in the coming days the cases will rise, but that is in line with the national picture. And we can't be complacent at this time. It's really important that all of us follow the prevention measures and really take the messaging quite seriously. We're also looking at, in terms of managing the individual outbreaks, we already have a really comprehensive local outbreak plan. And this is something that we have put into place when we have had many outbreaks in the past, whether it's the Oxford Brookes outbreaks quite recently, whether it was the BMW Cowley unit outbreak right at the start. We have managed to pick this up and contain it in a very effective way. So we've got these existing measures that we always use to manage outbreaks. We've now scaled that up, and we have got this in place to manage it in a very effective way. What we are also doing is we're also looking at a Oxfordshire local enhanced contact tracing, which will help us to follow up those who are not contactable through the national scheme, and that way we can have contact tracing happening in a prompt and a quick way. That will also be complemented by all the advice and all the measures that we take locally to manage the outbreak in a very effective way. And with regards to universities, I just want to say that we right from the start, we've worked in partnership with both universities and FE colleges. We've set up a task and finish group. We have worked very collaboratively to put the message out there and to create the COVID secure campuses that will make it very safe for the students and the communities alike. We will continue our communication. We will make sure our communities are safe, and we will make sure our students are safe. We have also stress tested our plans to make sure that it is effective when implemented. We also have mobilized a testing provision into the Oxford Brookes campus. And as mentioned by the previous speaker, we've also got specific provisions in Oxford University as well. So we have done a lot of things to make it safe. And so our ask is from the students is for them to also follow their bit and follow the prevention measures as much as they can. The best way, I've always said this, the best way to manage an outbreak is to prevent one in the first place. So as much as the things that we have done to manage the situation, I'm very confident that the students themselves will take active measures to prevent these measures. And we've put a lot of provisions in place to make it easier for the students. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very, very helpful. We've got just two more presentations now, or brief contributions from people. Next, we turn to Thames Valley Police and to Chief Inspector Jennifer Hogben, I believe.
Hello, good evening. My name is Jen Hogben. I'm the Chief Inspector here at Oxford City LPA. I'm the Deputy LPA Commander, and I have with me Inspector James Sullivan, who's the Neighbourhood Policing Team Inspector. So my role here at Oxford is to manage the operational response to COVID-19 for Oxford City LPA, and that response is shaped by the government guidance and translated by a team at headquarters, which is then filtered down to my department. So our LPA plan follows the 4 E's principle. So basically, it's massively important to engage with everyone, students and members of the public alike. So we ask our officers initially to engage with people that are gathering in groups of over 6. And once that engagement has happened, then we will explain the reasoning and the importance of them not gathering. If they don't disperse, then they are encouraged to do that. And if they continue to not disperse, then we enforce, or we will, so that will be the fixed penalty notices. So to paint a picture, this has been a very difficult time in policing, as you can well imagine. There's after March and the lockdown, we had a significant decrease in calls for service. However, due to restrictions lifting and more freedom of movement, so shops and the nighttime economy returning to normal, our demand has returned to normal levels. We've got a plan in place at Oxford to deal with this in operation, and I'll pass you across to James to explain that further.
Hello, yes, so as the Chief Inspector mentioned, this time last year, this demand on our service wasn't required, and it's very important that we balance this with normal policing duties, such as responding to burglaries, robberies, violent crime, etc. So we have generated this specific operation, which means we have a dedicated and protected resource that protects both the front lines, so the 999 responding, but also the neighbourhood teams as well. The primary response to COVID regulation breaches is being led by neighbour policing, but also with assistance by the Special Constabulary. So the way this looks at the moment is that during the day, we're seeking to call back everyone that is called in relating to a COVID breach. And speak to those reported people, and offer words of advice to those that have breached, go into addresses again, speak with people that we know have had gatherings in their houses. We're also seeking during the afternoon and into the evening, in the early hours of the morning, to operate a small team that will be proactively patrolling what we call hotspot areas, and they're tasked to move around the city, proactively patrolling those areas, and also to respond to any spontaneous reports we get of COVID regulation breaches. Throughout this as well, we're seeking to work in partnership with the council, who we'll hear a little bit later in relation to their COVID security, and also with the university security services. It's important that we emphasise it to the public that we will be seeking to prioritise responding to gatherings of a large nature, because they present the greater risk to the wider public health. And we would ask the public to support this operation locally by either reporting online through the Thames Valley website, or calling 101 to report.
So you can see that we're working collaboratively with council, universities, and communicating effectively between us by meeting very regularly, especially in the first stages of this part of the COVID-19 response. In these meetings, we're able to discuss at length the emerging issues and how we are going to assist them in dealing with them. And as my colleague says, it's not possible to deal with all reports, but we have plans in place to deal effectively to those that present a risk to public health. I hope that you can now see how seriously we're taking this, our role in this, and how we're going to attempt to keep our community safe during these unprecedented times. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been extremely helpful to have the policing perspective on this as well. Last, we turn to, in terms of the presentations, we turn to Ian Wright of Oxford City Council, who's our Head of Community Safety and Regulatory Services. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me. My internet link has been a little bit unstable. Our primary role, the City Council with regulatory services and community safety, has really been three parts to our role involving students. Firstly, there's our direct regulatory activity, where we are the primary enforcing authority. Secondly, there's been our role to support the activity and enforcement that's been carried out by partner agencies, such as the police and trading standards. And thirdly, we're also involved in outbreak control when there's actually an outbreak and action needs to be taken as part of that. So primarily, our direct regulatory activity, we have been at the forefront of enforcing a lot of legislation that's come in from the government, or the new controls over premises. So that's involved dealing with licensed premises, restaurants and takeaways, which are all the premises that students will go to. We have been using existing resources for that. So we've had environmental health officers contacting those businesses and ensuring that they know what the rules are. And we've also had significant resource out on the streets, checking businesses as well. So we've had the community response team out and about. We've had city centre ambassadors in the city centre checking premises. And we've also trained up people from our East Oxford hub also to go out and advise businesses on how to comply. We've had funding from the Director of Public Health, and we have set up a COVID secure team here in the city. It will be a county-wide function, obviously, but in the city at the moment, we've got an additional environmental health officer who's helping us out with business compliance and following up on outbreaks. And we've also had funding to create an out-of-hours service, which is operating. It started at 9 p.m. going through to 2 a.m. 7 days a week. And since the curfew changes in legislation, it's now operating from 8 p.m. To 1 a.m. in the morning. And the function of that staffing, it's two people who are out. They are carrying out proactive inspections of licensed premises to make sure that they are complying with the rule of 6 and all the other legislation that's come out from the government. And that's quite a good proactive presence there. They've carried out over 30 inspections of businesses so far, and they've been able to focus their efforts on the pubs primarily frequented by students, such as the White Horse, to ensure that those businesses are taking this matter very seriously. What they're also able to do is provide a reactive resource to student parties. So by calling the council's number, the 01865 249 811 number, people will be taken through the system there, and the out-of-hours service will pick complaints up about student parties where there's potentially illegal gatherings. Although it's Thames Valley Police who have the primary enforcement role there, we are able to carry out an early intervention. We link up with Thames Valley Police, and we can help them with the education and explanation part of their role. That second part, that is part of our support role. We are the eyes and ears. We can avoid duplication, we can respond first, and we can gather evidence to help our partners carry out their enforcement activities. And that's where we're helping the police. Our trading standards colleagues have the enforcement role for QR codes, the new system which has gone in. But obviously we are carrying out those visits to premises, so we can carry out the checks and refer back to those colleagues and whether they need to carry out any further action. Regards the universities as well, we can data share on premises of concern. So if there are student parties, then we can pick those up and deal with them through the community liaison officers. We're also continuing to enforce the business as usual legislation. So for instance, where there is ongoing noise nuisance or there's issues from housing multiple occupation, then we can pick those up via the Safer Oxford at oxford.gov.uk, can report into that. So, our existing powers to deal with ongoing issues are still there and still being used. The third strand is around outbreaks. So if there is an outbreak, as there has been very recently, an incident control team is formed, run by Health Protection, Public Health England, and environmental health officers are part of that and get tasked to carry out visits and check premises and feedback into the process. And will also be involved in carrying out where track and trace, as people have failed to respond to them. So we'll also be carrying out that particular function as well.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. And can I thank everyone for their presentations, which were not only very informative, but also very succinct, and that's given us plenty of time for questions. What I propose to do is do a kind of first round of questions which people have submitted in advance. I've got these in front of me. A lot of them are focused at the universities, so I think maybe in the first instance we'll turn to Professor O'Brien and Professor Kilday for their thoughts on these, if I may, and then we'll widen things out. And these are going to be quite specifically, I think, focused on the universities. Then I'll turn to anyone else that's got stuff to chip in on those questions. We'll then also open it up because there are a number of people who are seeking to ask questions live as part of this event, and then we'll see where we get to from there. So, I'll go through a few of these, please. So if you're happy to keep a pen handy just to make a note of what's being asked, that would be really good. The first one is, have you been able to learn anything from the experience of other institutions such as Glasgow, Manchester and Leeds, and lockdowns of student accommodation? Clearly this is a situation we're new in. What's the sort of learning been around that? Someone's asking why colleges are still planning what they call non-remote student events when it's known drunk people don't socially distance. And then there's a kind of another question about why junior common room bars at Oxford University are being closed, and wouldn't it be better to have students in college buildings rather than forming larger groups in local pubs? There was a specific question to Brookes about whether someone had heard that they would be teaching in large lecture halls of up to 80 students. I can see, Professor, you're shaking your head, so that should answer that one, but you'll probably want to confirm it. Another question sent in, being asked is about tuition fees, whether there are any plans to reduce tuition fees, and students will students who are only here in Oxford for a year of their course have a chance to repeat some of that? And then maybe to avoid it getting too long, someone's noticed on the river that there are both 4s and 8s. Some of the students wearing masks, not all 2 meters apart. So are there any particular reflections about activity on the river? Apologies, that was quite a batch, but if we don't batch them, I think we won't get through them. Professor Kilday, if we perhaps turn to you first, and I know some of those were specifically addressed to Brookes, and then we'll turn to Professor O'Brien.
Okay. The first one was, have we learned anything from other universities? Yes, I'm in contact with my opposite numbers at other universities, and we're sharing information all of the time about what's been going on, what things are effective, what things aren't so effective. So yes, we're doing that on a regular basis, and we all have networks that we're part of to do that information sharing. The next one specifically for Brookes was about teaching in large lectures. I think I said in my opening spiel that we're not doing any large lecture teaching. We're only doing small group teaching. And all of that socially distanced, and all the students are wearing, and staff are wearing face coverings. In terms of tuition fee reduction, I don't think there are plans at this stage for anything to do with that. I think that's something that we would want government guidance on and broader discussion about. And will there be the opportunity you asked for some students to repeat if that was necessary? I think the plans that we've put in place are robust enough that that shouldn't be necessary. But in the event of a local lockdown or something like that, there are certain programs that we offer where that it would be difficult not to have a face-to-face element. If you think about some subject areas with labs, some subject areas with placements and so on and so forth. So in those circumstances, it might be appropriate for us to offer students the chance to defer, or a whole multitude of other options would be on the table at that point. And the last one, I think, I hope I haven't missed any out for us, but you raised about rowers on the river. Thank you for raising that one. The guidance is that students do not have to wear masks outside. So that is why when on the river, they're not doing that. We understand from helpful resident comments that the rowers were not wearing face coverings on towpaths and places like that. And we've contacted the club captain and the director of sport at the university to make sure that happens. So if they're passing members of the community, they will be wearing face coverings. So we've already taken care of that.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very useful. And now we need to turn to Professor O'Brien from Oxford University for thoughts on those questions. Obviously, with the Oxford term starting that little bit later, there's even more opportunity for learning from other places, and indeed probably quite a lot more questions being asked. So be grateful for your thoughts on all of those questions.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you, Councillor Turner. We are in the happy position of starting later. And as I mentioned earlier, we're very grateful to Brookes actually for sharing their experiences with us and for other universities. And I think the big lesson is, and Ben will back me up here, is to be preemptive, to explain and engage early before situations get out of hand and have that early dialogue with students. I think things are a little different for us because all of our freshers are housed within colleges. Those are quite small communities. It's going to be a little bit easier for us to keep an eye, keep a lid and explain in that context. I think the other thing to say is that half of all of our students are postgraduate students. So they've probably done some of their partying at a younger age in many cases, and that we don't have many large halls of residence. And the larger halls like Summertown House are postgraduate halls of residence. So there are things that we can learn. There are things that are different and possibly, we hope, are going to make life a little bit more straightforward for us. But also, I think the other thing that we've learned is just how dreadful it is for students. And I speak as a parent, as well as a member of the university, to be sort of locked, to arrive on campus, possibly to have quarantined and then to find themselves confined in their room. And I think we will try and we hope that our students will want to do everything they can to avoid being in that position. And we have thought very deeply about how we support students in that position, but we're continuing to think because we have to look at it from their perspective. It's really, really difficult. So I think those are the things that we've learned. I might just comment on the tuition fee points and then ask my colleague Jan to comment on the points about student events and bars. So government guidance at the moment is that if you can deliver the learning outcomes and the robust assessment associated with your degrees, with your academic staff working very hard to do this online, then you are not currently expected to offer a tuition fee reduction. We have, as many universities have, had a very good experience of having to switch entirely online during the summer term and had very good feedback from our students. But we also understand there are some kinds of degrees, lab-based medical degrees, an art school in our case, where that is going to be difficult. And if we are compelled by circumstances to be more online than we currently mean to be, we will need to put in place a catch-up package and catch-up measures to enable those students to fulfill the learning outcomes of their degrees. But that is the current position, and our staff have really worked very hard and adapted very brilliantly to online teaching. And having done online teaching myself, online tutorials, I can say that it can be a very high quality educational experience, but you miss out on the social side of things. So I might ask Jan if she could comment on the other aspects of the question.
Yes, gladly. So my name's Jan Royal and I'm principal of Somerville College. And if students were just stuck in their rooms all day in front of a computer, it would be bad for their mental health and bad for their well-being in particular. That's why we're working very closely with our student unions to ensure that we can provide safe spaces within our colleges so that they can have social events together. And all the social events that are organised have to be properly risk assessed, so that we know that they're going to be behaving responsibly. They're going to have to do the 2-metre social distance. If events are inside, they'll have to wear their face coverings. And we want them to be able to have some sort of social experience, some sort of student experience whilst they're in Oxford, but we want them to do it in a safe way that guarantees the safety of the citizens of Oxford. So why are there some bars closing? Because some bars in colleges are simply too small to have social distancing, so they're not having the bars open. Other colleges are in the happy position of being able to provide marquees, etc., where students can do more outside. But it really depends on the space available in colleges. But I do want to stress that in all these things, we are working together with the students, because we believe that that's going to be the best outcome for the students, the best outcome for the university, but also the best outcome for the citizens of Oxford.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Jan. Ben, you wanted to chip in as well from a student union perspective on some of these social events, which I know are an area which is sort of giving rise to particular concern.
Absolutely, and we do share and understand a lot of the concerns that the residents might have about that, and that's why we have been working closely with our colleagues in the university to help put in those places for that preemptive step to actually have kind of COVID secure spaces within the university for students to socialise. And we've been putting in place the guidance at the student union to provide event planning templates and risk assessment tools for student leaders to actually plan those events, of course, in line with government guidance and changing where appropriate. And Jan's absolutely right. We know that even pre-COVID levels, over up to a third of students experience a mental health problem whilst they're at university. And a really important aspect of that is socialising to help break down the barriers, especially for students who are arriving at Oxford for the first time. And we think that's really important, and that can be a combination of virtual and face-to-face events, and that's across aspects as well, from social events and also to sport, where similarly we've taken a very clear approach following the national governing body guidance for that sport, with additional measures in place to ensure that sport can take place safely at Oxford.
Thanks very much indeed. We'll now turn in just a second to some questions being asked live. And if I could ask council colleagues to please elevate, if they're here, Mike, Harry T, Graziella, and Harry H to the panel, so that they'll be able to ask questions. And just while we're waiting for that to happen, Mike's put a useful question in the chat about private accommodation providers. I'm not sure if either of the universities would wish to say anything about whether private providers of accommodation, not directly university halls of residence, might be accessed by your students and relevant here, or if Ian or Ansaf have any thoughts on those. There's a separate question being asked as well about some of the smaller education institutions in Oxford, and we'll make sure that that's picked up by the council as well, because that is an important point. Any questions on private, any comments on smaller private halls of residence or other accommodation blocks?
Ed, I'm not quite sure what the question is getting at, but what I would say is that if there were any incidents in private accommodation which is rented by students, then we would wish to ensure that they, they too had to adhere to our disciplinary codes, etc., because we believe that students, whether they're living in colleges or without colleges, they should all act in accordance with the law, of course, but they should also respect the citizens of Oxford and be responsible citizens. And I think that the vast majority of our students are responsible citizens, and I'm very proud of them and what they contribute to the community. But where people act outside the law or outside what what they should be doing, then of course we must take the appropriate disciplinary procedures.
Thank you very much indeed. So the very first live question is due to be asked by Mike, and questions about coming and going from Oxford. Mike, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question, that would be great. Mike, you're still muted, I'm afraid. We can see you, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, so it's two kind of linked questions about the wider kind of community that is affected. So firstly is private purpose-built halls of residence where they're not necessarily directly linked to a university. So a private provider, have they appropriately designated households? What kind of links do the universities have to make sure that's fine? It appears that what's happening at Manchester Metropolitan University is connected with private providers rather than the university itself. So, what kind of grip do the providers have? And then a kind of very arcane question about some of the private higher education providers in Oxford. It's not just the two universities, and who's got an overview of their activities, and are the same kind of conversations we're having with them? They do also have students. How's that working for them?
Thanks for raising those points. I think also you'd sent in a question beforehand, which was just such a good question. I'm going to put it now for you.
You can remember it. Well done.
No way. No. I'll have to remind you. It's really good. I mean, how much thought's been given to combating student boredom if people can't go about their normal activities, and particularly what are the universities' attitudes to students coming and going from Oxford, especially at the weekend, which may well be a temptation if not much is happening here. If we'll hold those points just for now. Graziella, you've got a question you wanted to ask as well.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, hello. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So I live in East Oxford, and I'm a resident here, but I'm also a professional and a parent and also a PhD student. And I mean, my question really relates to the loud parties or gathering, even like less than 6 people during working days. So we had occasionally difficult days or evenings in the past when students organized house parties. However, during the lockdown, and again now in September, the situation for many residents, and I'm talking really on behalf of some of my neighbors, has been extremely challenging when students organize house parties during working days and during the day without any consideration of the fact that residents were and are still working from home, and loud noises are really disruptive, to say the least. So, when we try to contact the university, students always reply, yeah, but we try to, stop the music by 11 o'clock. But the point that we are really working from home, so even loud music during the day is extremely disruptive. And so I think that university also should rethink, how, the noise should be regulated during working days and during the day. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. I'll turn to colleagues to respond on those, but in the meantime as well, if I could ask for Christopher, Annie, Margaret and Susan to be elevated to the panel as well, and we'll come to your questions next. I think actually maybe on that last question about some of the sort of noise and difficulties in the daytime, Ian Wright from Oxford City Council, if I could turn to you first, please.
Yeah, I mean, with that type of issue, we do have powers to intervene and deal with noise nuisance. When it's a student property, we will, of course, liaise with the relevant university. For instance, if it's Brookes, then it's Brookes Community Liaison that we will advise and ask them to carry out the education part of dealing with that. And I know that they've got their own disciplinary code around noise, but we also have our own powers. We can serve noise abatement notices, or we can serve community protection notice warnings where students do not comply with requests to keep the noise down and behave reasonably. I mean, I see that as a different issue to parties and illegal gatherings. For me, that's, you know, that's a separate issue. As the person was saying, this is, you know, the students, there's 4 of them in the house, for instance, they're playing the music loud, they've got nowhere to go, so that's why they're doing that. And I think, you know, we do have a role to play there, and you know, reports can be made on Safer Oxford at oxford.gov.uk. We will pursue those, and obviously liaise with the relevant university to try and resolve it.
Thank you very much. Any responses from universities about, well, I think we've talked a little bit about the halls of residence, but also student boredom and people going home at the weekend. Professor Kilday, Anne-Marie.
Well, in relation to the private accommodation question, our residential services team are in contact with private landlords and private providers of that sort. We also have the community wardens that work closely with private providers and the community to pick up any issues. So that's how we are dealing and liaising with them in relation to that. In terms of parties and noise, yes, we will communicate again to our students to be mindful of that. Especially given the comments that were made about working from home during the day. I guess, you know, if it's intolerable, that's a significant problem. And I'm sorry to hear that that's been an issue, and we can remind them about that. But on the same hand, they will listen to loud music and have to be able to live their lives where they live, I suppose. But I appreciate that if it's going on for a prolonged period of time, that's not a nice experience. So we can re-communicate something about that. In terms of students travelling back and forth from Oxford, obviously they're adults, so we can't control their movement. We can just give them guidelines about social distancing and appropriate behaviours, and what to do if they feel unwell or know of a close contact that feels unwell, and so on and so forth. So we can't control them moving back and forth outside of Oxford, but we can and we do remind them about their behaviours and the government guidelines and what they should be following.
Thank you very much indeed. And I must admit, hearing this particular conversation, you know, does remind me that we shouldn't always focus, and there's no, I'm not suggesting obviously that the questioner in any way does this, but students as the source of news, and so there are relatively few students in the patch that I represent as a councillor, and sadly there have been issues with some people not acting in a particularly social way, with some activity making it unpleasant for people to enjoy their gardens. And of course, enjoyment of gardens, needing peace and quiet when you're working from home has been particularly important in this phase. And so it's also important residents feel able to contact the council in that circumstance as well. That very much isn't just about students. We will, Karen or Jan, would either of you like to say anything a bit about student boredom and also about leaving Oxford in terms of the Oxford students?
Sorry,
Jan, I might just turn to you. Yes, I think.
Okay. So leaving Oxford, I mean, students are citizens like you and I. Therefore, if they have to self-isolate, clearly they're not going to leave Oxford. If there's a lockdown, they're not going to leave Oxford. Otherwise, as Professor Anne-Marie was saying, as long as they socially distance and behave, you know, like sensible, responsible members of the public, they're free to leave. We don't want to incarcerate our students. We want them to have the life that they need to have. But we will ask them to act responsibly, clearly. When it comes to trying to ensure they're not bored, as Ben was saying earlier, and he might well want to come in, there are an awful lot of student societies and lots of activities going on in colleges in a socially responsibly organised way. They have to have their activities risk assessed. There is ample guidance in terms of club, society, sport, music, drama, all sorts of things. So we are doing everything we can to ensure that students aren't bored and that they do have some sort of really good student experience. Won't be easy this term, but that is, we're resolved to do whatever we can. But Ben, what do you think?
No, I'd agree with that, and I think that's definitely a challenge that we've all been facing, and I'm sure Daisy's happy to well, I think wanted to talk about the same point. So keen to hear what's happened there.
Great, Daisy, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so student boredom is something I think both student unions have been thinking about, and it's something that's on our minds. So Brookes Union, we've got a calendar of events, so we've got a lot of online activities. We've been running things like yoga, a lot of welfare sessions. So today we had a session on productive sleep, how to sleep properly and ensure that people are looking after their mental health and welfare. We've also got things like online escape rooms and games, and our many student societies have been great and moved most of their activity online, and we've seen a great uptake in this. A lot of people have hosted Netflix parties, which has been really popular. It's a way that people can safely stay in their room but still get that student interaction. But we're also aware that students still have studying to do, so they've still got their degree to do. So we're hoping that they shouldn't be too bored. They've still got obviously assignments and studying to do, but just like everyone else, they've also got jobs and responsibilities as well. So we're hoping that with an online activity of calendars and everything else going on, we want to keep on top of it, but it's something we're very aware of.
Super, thank you. Anne-Marie, you wanted to quickly come back in on the boredom point as well.
Yeah, it's something that Karen mentioned earlier, and something we are actively working on, and that's the mental health of our students, feeling isolated, and Daisy touched on it there. Part of the things we've been doing in the move to all the provision that we've got for this semester is, as well as the basic curriculum, all of our programs have enrichment activities built into them as well. So for instance, a history of art students' enrichment activity might be to go and access a virtual gallery tour and so on and so forth. So there's additional things built in. We also have a wellbeing group at Brookes called Be Well, where staff and students have come together. Daisy is on this. And that's developed a whole suite of different kinds of packages to support students so that they don't feel isolated. So mental health support, online activities, games, and things that bring them together online so that they can feel more supported and more part of the Brookes community, and have that cohort identity. So I just wanted to add that one.
Super, thank you. Unless there's any more immediate responses on those questions raised just now, people should give me a wave or indicate if there are. I will turn to Harry H for his question, and then we'll have the other questions from people who've joined us. Harry.
Great, thanks very much, Ed. And thank you to all of the people who've spoken so far. I found it really interesting and certainly very reassuring. My question is coming from the context of running both private international summer schools, so bringing international students to Oxford to stay in the colleges over the summer, and also working with an education outreach charity that does a similar thing for young people from the UK to help raise their aspirations and attainment. And I was just wondering what reassurances we can get from the university that summer programs will be able to take place this summer. The last year has been very challenging because obviously everything was cancelled in the spring. A lot of money was lost from the business and also from the charity, and all of the students missed out on their opportunities. So as we all hope, the vaccine will come in and hopefully be the silver bullet that we all want. But I'm just wondering whether there's any planning and reassurances that can be given on that side of things.
Thanks very much indeed, Harry. And of course, that's also an important reminder of just how important students are to our economy in Oxford. And while people have been very concerned about what the return of students will mean in health terms, also we mustn't forget that students are very much part of what makes Oxford and are very, very important to people whose livelihood depends on it as well. I think before turning to colleagues for a response, I will bring in a few more live questions. And next I've got Chris. Chris, would you like to ask your question, please?
Hi, thank you. I should know I'm a colleague of Harry's, so I had a quite similar question lined up, but I will ask a kind of more specific aspect of that in terms of our planning for what we might do in university vacations in future. Are there scenarios in which the universities will consider changing term dates? Are there lockdown scenarios that would mean that the terms would be extended or postponed or anything like that? So that's my question.
Thank you. Annie.
Right. Hello, everybody. Students frequently live in properties that are can accommodate 4 or 5 people, and some accommodate even more. There's some places that accommodate 12. What are the rules for partners and visitors, given the rule of 6? Because if you have one of the properties with 12 people in, and there's 24 people coming, including the visitors, that's like a party anyway. And I just wondered how this was being enforced and discussed amongst the police and the City Council and also the County Council.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to give advance notice, probably turn to police first on that one and then to City Council. Margaret, if you'd like to ask your question, please. Margaret, you're currently muted.
Well, there we go. There we go. Sorry.
All good. All good. Fire away.
All good now. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Turner. Mine is not a question. I would like to make an observation of the positive partnerships and the benefits that have been given by students. Yes, there have been recent examples of unacceptable behaviour by some students, but I wish to say thank you to the very many students who have, during the last few months, been involved in the various community support teams in Oxford, Oxford Together being one of these support groups. I'm almost repeating what Ben was saying earlier on, and I thought I really don't need to be saying this now, but I will continue. And if it wasn't for COVID-19, the students, when they return in October, some of them would have been once again offering to give free IT training to older people. And I chair Oxford 50+ Network. And this would have been the 5th year that we would have been holding in October the free IT training classes. And the Oxford Student Hub in Little Clarendon Street offers many other services, and they're for all ages. So I just wish to say thank you very much to the students for their voluntary involvement, and that I'm actually looking forward to working with them again, and I hope it won't be too long before we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret, and I'm glad you didn't discount that question because it's a very important point. And last we turn to Susan from Duenty Road Area Residents Association, I think. Susan.
Hi, my question is involves an out of university incident which happened to me on the Cowley Road. So this is going to have a little bit of a personal flavor. I was walking down the Cowley Road over the weekend, and I had a scarf held up to my face, and I was passed by a group of 4 young people. I presume they were students, but I can't be sure. And they seemed to split and came on either side of me. And one of them got close enough to me to actually touch me. I mean, touch my hand. So his hand touched my hand, which is the sort of thing that I thought maybe could have happened randomly. But I saw him then turn around and laugh at me, or laugh, and then shared a joke among his friends. Now, I didn't do anything. I didn't respond. I was a little bit shocked, and I just wonder whether or not you can suggest any sort of action or response that would be most effective in dealing with this. My worry is that students do have some feeling of negativity from the residents in our area, and I wonder whether or not this is a way of lashing out a little bit. just a way of sort of venting it, perhaps.
Susan, thank you very much indeed for that. And obviously, very sorry that you had to put up with that incident. And if I may, it does feel like one as well where it's not exclusively the preserve of students to act in a way which is, and a tiny minority of students to act in a way which is obnoxious. And sadly, there are a handful of very inconsiderate people. And so really, on that, turning to Thames Valley Police, there's a couple of questions. One about enforcement in houses in multiple occupation, and the point that if you've got a house of 6 and then everyone brings a friend or two, then you end up with a very large gathering, and how you would cope with that. And also the incident just described, what advice you would give a resident confronting with the experience that Susan had.
No, thank you. That was a really good question in relation to, we'll come to both of those. We'll start with the multi-occupancy question first. So yeah, you paint a picture there. You might have a household of 6 or 7 or 8 people in a shared accommodation. They're not allowed to each have a partner come over. There is an exception that you can have 2 linked households in the government regulations, or a support bubble, provided that one of those households is one adult alone. And any number of young children as well. So one adult alone can link with another household, but that is it. You can't have a number of students each having their own partner around. That would be a breach of the regulations, and we would seek to address that. And I think my colleague will take on the second question.
And also just to make note that if you link with that single adult, if that link has broken, you are not able to introduce a further single person into your bubble. So just to build on that point there. And then in relation to Susan, the incident that you described there, if you felt at all threatened in any way, or anybody is in a position where they're feeling threatened or scared as a result of any kind of contact with another member of the public, then you must call either 101 or 999 if it is an emergency. In relation to the incident there, Susan, I'm not going to be able to answer your incident fully, because there are other things I'd like to ask about it. But if you do want to make contact with me, you can do, and I'll look further into it.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Professor Karen O'Brien just a second about the university calendar, unless she wants to pass it to a colleague. But just then also a heads up to Anne-Marie, Professor Kilday. I think maybe just put that last question about shared accommodation to yourself as well. Just whether Brookes has been communicating that message, which feels an important one, about the importance of not adding people to a household in a way which will breach the regulations. So first of all, Professor O'Brien.
Thank you. I might turn to Jill Aitken, who's our registrar, on the term dates question, and then to Jan on the question of summer programs in colleges, because I think it is important to recognise the sort of economic cost of the city, of the joint working with the city that we have around our premises, and just what a loss was incurred this summer. So I think it would be good to air that as well. So perhaps I could ask Jill to comment on the term dates question.
So thanks very much for that question. And of course, we've already said, Karen has already said, that Oxford University has benefited a bit from having a slightly later term date, because we have been able to respond. We've learned a great deal from talking to Brookes about what has happened as the first students return there. I don't think that changing term dates is going to be something that will be a really important part of our toolkit in addressing this. That we're talking now about the end of term, this term and next term. What we're seeing with the pandemic is that things can change really quite quickly. They've changed really quite quickly in the last few weeks. It is unlikely that we're going to be looking far enough ahead that we will be able to say that it would be really sensible to either start the spring term, our Hillary term, early or late next term round. So I don't think it's going to be useful. That said, we would, of course, if suddenly there was evidence that there was going to be a particular problem and it was going to coincide with a lot of movements of students around the country, we would obviously think about it. I might just take the one about some schools next summer. I'm sure Jan will have another comment to make. It's a real matter of concern to us that businesses that we partner with in the university, whether in university buildings or college buildings, have taken a hit through this pandemic. The hit that you've taken, Harry and Chris, is very much one that we also are taking. We welcome those summer schools and we welcome the income. It's part of our economy as much as it is part of yours. I think we can't really give you reassurances about what life is going to be like next summer, but we really hope to welcome you back.
Thank you very much indeed. Jan, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
No, Jill is absolutely right. We really, really want you to come back, but it's up to the pandemic. I'm terribly sorry. We need you. We've got a mutual benefit here. We want you back for so many reasons.
Thank you. Ansaf, you wanted to come in on some of these points, then I'll turn to John Kirk, in fact.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to make a general point about the timings of all this. What we know at the moment is that the pandemic is at this scale often has had a second peak. And then if you look at the Spanish flu history, for an example, there is a bigger second peak. So what we are seeing right now, we're expected to see over a sort of in the medium term, in the next 6 months. And that's all we know at the moment. It's very difficult to preempt what will happen beyond that. We are expecting that come next spring, if everything goes well, that we will, we will be able to get some kind of stability from this. But actually, what will also happen is that we will have the vaccination that will start to roll through. What we have to emphasize is that if you're expecting some kind of normality in the next sort of 2 to 3 months, I think that's unexpected. We even with the vaccination, it will take time for the vaccination to achieve the coverage it needs to achieve. So the test and tracing part of it will become massively important. And my last point is about the new normal. This makes it all the more important that we adapt to a new normal way of working and the way we're operating, and the sensible conversations that we've had about addressing boredom to mental well-being. All these things becomes massively important because we are going to be on this for a period of time. But I think one of the things I would just finish off on is that let's not preempt too much too early in terms of what's going to happen. We're going to have to learn as we go along. As I said, it's what we call a once in a 100-year pandemic. So I just want to add those a few points. Thank you.
Thanks. No, thanks very much indeed, Ansaf. That's a really helpful background. So now quickly turning to John Kirk from Oxford Brookes University, just a question about the shared accommodation and making sure students are aware of their responsibilities under the regulations, not to go adding in lots of other people into their household in a way that contravenes those regulations, and also any comments you had on summer schools.
Yeah, excuse me. So certainly, if I could take the summer schools bit first, we would completely echo what Gillian and Jan said as well. Obviously, we would very much look forward to welcoming those students back to us in the summer, but obviously it's going to depend on the circumstances and what's safe to do at the time. With regards to the rule of 6 and multiple occupants in houses and households, we've been very clear with our students since the rule came in on the 14th of September through both social media campaigns and regular communication updates with students that they understand what this means. We've been very clear about it in the accommodation that we own and where we can enforce it. But in terms of outside of the university-owned accommodation, we also have our community engagement team who are liaising with households where there are concerns that they may have misunderstood what we have communicated to them, and where there are concerns about behaviours there that we've been going in, making sure that they understand, and if it's clear that they understand but not following it, then that's where we're taking action against them.
Thank you very much indeed for that response, and indeed thank you to everyone who's asked a question. I think everyone who asked to join ask a question live has now done so. So our council colleagues may flick a switch and you may notice a slight change on your Zoom, but really appreciate you taking the chance. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm just looking over the pre-submitted questions. There are one or two which we haven't quite picked up. One was actually focused at local government activity. So I'll turn to Ian and Ansaf for answers. What local government's doing to prevent the increase in cases, and what can be done to make it clearer and easier for people to navigate the streets. That was a question which was asked. There was a question about whether different colleges take different approaches. So perhaps, Jan, that would be something that you would like to comment on, and whether there are discrepancies between the approach taken by different colleges. There was a question as well about Oxford University student marshals who used to walk around in the Jericho area. That was an initiative from a while ago, and whether those still exist. I'm guessing that might be for Jan, or possibly for Ian might know something about that. And then I think what I'll do after bringing in colleagues specifically on those is see if there are any very last comments. We are nearly out of time, so if I could ask people to be quite brief. Ian Wright first, perhaps on council support, city council support on these issues.
I mean, certainly, you know, we are leading quite a big, heavy comms campaign, pushing information out there, and working with, you know, the Director of Public Health around where we can add value. In terms of our role, we are checking those premises that need to be checked. You know, we are responding to complaints that come into us. We have carried out a lot of community engagement as well. And in relation to providing that COVID security, that's what we've been building on with our out of hours service and the daytime service that we've been providing. So quite a lot of regulatory activity to ensure that where people are going is safe. And there was also the question around people navigating the streets. You know, we did put in the one-way systems. You know, we have done what a lot of councils have done around badging up the lampposts and what have you. So we have been doing that work. What we haven't done is go further than that and start instructing people on where to walk, etc. I just think that you know, that wasn't going to go down well. So what we focused on really is making sure that the premises that people go into are safe and regulate those. Clearly, lots of meetings with partners to make sure that the messages are getting out there. And certainly working with the universities and FE colleges. There's quite a lot of meetings which take place, and every Monday we have a briefing post-weekend with Brookes and the university, ourselves and the police about issues which have cropped up at the weekend and how they've been dealt with.
Ian, thanks. That's great. Ansaf, from a public health perspective, is there anything you'd wish to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I covered some of these points in my introduction, but just to be very specific about it, we've got a very comprehensive outbreak plan, which we are in place to kind of pick up early signs of infections and contain it. The surveillance unit looks at the data every single day and actually manages outbreaks and cases every single day, and actually it puts measures in place to make sure that it doesn't escalate any further. The other thing I want to touch on is what is known as the containment framework. It's not all about introducing local control measures and lockdowns. when we know there's a rise in cases, we make links, we make epidemiological links, and we look at soft intelligence that comes with that to try and understand the epidemiology. As a director of public health, I get more worried not by the rising numbers. I get more worried when I can't explain the epidemiology. So what we often do is we look at those patterns and we put out targeted extended communication, and that's how we managed the previous rise in cases. We did specific communications through GP practices to that particular age group from 20 to 30-year-olds, if you like. And actually that kind of targeted message really helps. We will also engage with the communities where that was relevant, community leaders and so on. Just before Eve, we spoke to faith leaders, and when we had fairs and events, we spoke with the fair organizers. So those kind of proactive measures really help. But in addition to that, if it gets bigger and beyond that, we also do other things like proactive testing, where like we mobilized the Union Street car park mobile testing unit when we had high rises. So there is a way we would introduce these things to prevent from escalating of the outbreak. And if none of that is working, then we will consider local control measures. So it's not necessarily a case of jumping into local control measures. We would take that systematically, and we will look at what's happening with the outbreaks. And lastly, just to touch on, we are also looking at local enhanced contact tracing to look at if there's any failed cases that the national system hasn't picked up, so we can follow that up. And then very quickly, Ian alluded to the COVID secure team. That's a proactive measure that we're doing, not just going and managing outbreak, but the COVID secure team will actually work with the businesses, workplaces and settings to really help pick up any early signs or non-compliances that we can address right at the start to prevent outbreaks from occurring in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Jan, we've got a few seconds just around coherence across the colleges.
But just to say that throughout the planning processes, the university and all colleges, including the students, have been working really closely together. All colleges have got the same protocols in place where it comes to cleaning, accommodation, catering, etc. And what we want to do is try to ensure that as far as possible, the students have got some sort of parity of experience as well. And so we're exchanging best practice, all our students are working together. And when it comes to discipline, which is important, I know, to the community, we also want to try to ensure a consistent approach, because we believe this is important for the students, but it's also important for the wider community. But I want to end on a good high note, saying that we really have worked closely together, and one doesn't know what's going to happen in next term, but I'm confident that we have got the best plans in place, and we will continue to work across the university, but with Brookes as well, with the police and with the City Council. And if we all work together, I think that we can find a way in these very challenging times.
Jan, thank you, and I'm glad you ended on that positive note. So our time is now up. We're reminded in this session about the Oxford Together programme, where people came together to support their communities. And this discussion and the hard work which has clearly gone on in the background feels like almost another strand of Oxford Together, because it is about different parts of our city, different authorities all working together. We know we've got a huge challenge. We know this is perhaps the most difficult time any of us has lived through, and clearly a very tough challenge for the agencies, for the professionals, but also, of course, for the students coming to or returning to Oxford. I'm sure people listening will have found this informative and will have got a sense of some of the hard work which has been going on in the background and some of the planning which has gone on. Clearly, for all of this to work, we're also reliant on individuals, and I'm sure many of the people on this call will be doing their best to try and make sure that individuals also play their part and that we can keep Oxford safe. But this has been a valuable meeting. If people have feedback, please do drop me a line personally, Ed Turner, I'm a councillor, or to the City Council's communications team. All of the agencies on this call have also expressed a willingness to hear from members of the public about what's going on, about their perceptions of how things are working. So please let this dialogue continue. With that, thank you very much indeed to everyone for joining this session. We're really grateful for your attendance. Thank you to everyone who's working so hard to try to keep Oxford safe